All right. In theory, let's check and see if everything's correct. Yes. And let's go to profile.
Technical dragons secured.
Well, at least with the YouTube.
Right.
In theory, I can't tell because I'm me.
We are at least live on YouTube.
We are also live on Instagram.
Wonderful.
I just figured that out how to do that. So now I have to figure out how to. Yes. Okay. I'll have to mute that. All right.
Evening,
well, we were just trying to. I just wanted to see if it could be done. You know, you sometimes you have to try things, and you don't know if you should, but you have to see if it can be done, and that's what we're doing here. But anyway, this is PH2T3R. Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture, and this is our weekly show. We wanted to see if we could live stream it to Instagram as well. It's going to be a short one this week because I think Mr. Robertson, FIA News Store, has to break out pretty quick because he has many other things to do. But we're going to run through some topics. We'll see what we're talking about. We just kind of go through. We don't do themes anymore, but we always end up having. So we'll find a theme here in a second, and if anybody has any questions or comments or whatever, we'll try to address those as well. But once News Store and I get talking, then sometimes it's hard to stop us. And we are also joined. One of our other hosts on the show is also Mr. I won't even bother to dead name him, but Mr. Tormenos, who is Bull Among Sages on Instagram. And so, and he's one of our sage members of the Order of Fire, and he's joining us as well. All right, News Store. What would you like to talk about? You sent me that. I don't want to. I'm scared of even getting down this rabbit hole. But you sent me that video because you're taking Michael Millerman's course on.
Yes,
right now.
And I'll say for anyone who's listening to this who has the money, because he's not cheap, but it is worthwhile if you have the money. Dr. Millerman's courses are phenomenal. Agnator and I, of course, did a walkthrough of Plato's Republic ourselves, which was about 30% longer on the audio side than the book itself. So it was fairly thorough, and I was quite proud of it. And I think we should be proud of it. It was a very good introduction to this. But there is no bottom to the layers of depth in that book, in the Republic and to Plato generally. And there's always more layers to go. And Dr. Millerman is an excellent tour guide of many of those layers, especially through a Straussian lens. And it seemed relevant because many of the guys in the order have been noticing this trends of Gen Z vitalists popping up on social media, and they're ragging on bodybuilders. They're ragging on powerlifters for being like roided out freaks and unnatural and things like that. And it's a very strange phenomena to people who are maybe on the outside looking in. And I take intrinsic pleasure in sort of, I think Tarmonos and Agnator, as fellow etymology nerds, share this pleasure too, in tracing out the origins of these things. Where is this coming from? Where is this movement? What started this? And there's, of course, an author known as Costin Alamariu, who's fairly well established as the pseudonymous Bronze Age pervert as well, who wrote a couple of books that seem to be the source of this kind of Gen Z Nietzschean vitalism that's coming up. And it's interesting because Alamariu is himself a Straussian. A Straussian, for people who are new to all of this terminology, and I always worry about losing people in the lingo here. Strauss was a classicist and a philosopher who argued that Plato was writing esoterically. There's a hidden message in the Republic and in other Platonic dialogues. But not all the Straussians agree on what that message is, and Costin and his thesis in his very controversial and edgy book Selective Breeding and the Origins of Philosophy, or something like that, basically argues that the philosopher and the tyrant have a similar nature. And so he's arguing that's not saying we should be tyrants, but there's an aspect of the tyrant that is sort of repressed by civilization, and men should cultivate that inner higher nature, not so that they can just become tyrants necessarily, although that's how a lot of young men take it, and we see that in social media, but so that they can have this base of spirit and energy that can then be refined into something more positive. Unfortunately, that gets lost. And Plato and Nietzsche disagree about the direction and the order, and there's all kinds of interesting debates about what's going on. But it's cool to see like phenomena like that and be like, oh, and here's the origin point of that. Here's the seed that sprouted this particular, bush, or full-blown tree, as the case may be in some instances. And I mean, we both, I think, had very similar takes, which is like there's something positive in the energy, but there's an immaturity and there's a grossness to the way it expresses itself as well.
Well, the way what you just said, if you give, as we've discussed a few times, sometimes when you give young men certain kinds of literature, it's maybe the wrong, you'll get a certain response that you wouldn't get 10, 15 years later.
Right.
This is true of Nietzsche. You give, they just see the words will to power, and it means something that's different maybe from what it actually means. And or what, there's so many interpretations. I mean, there are communist and fascist interpretations of Nietzsche. You have people all over the place. But and another one is give a young man might is right. Or Satanism, anything, all the, and then these social Darwinist kind of ideas, and you get a certain response out of that. And this is kind of another one of those areas. If you give a young man certain, they'll get certain things out of it without saying, maybe, how does this fit into a world that I want to live in if I'm not the ruler?
Right.
And that's the tricky part, is that, like the same thing with Machiavelli's The Prince, which we talked about a good bit earlier this year. You give that to a young man and you'll turn him into a sociopath.
Which is what we see with Robert Greene and his 48 Laws of Power.
That's another book that if you give it to an 18-year-old, you're going to end up with a sociopath. And these are all things that they're all good things to read. But at the same time, they can lead you down to a road. And like I said, what they're saying isn't wrong. Like in many cases, we're saying about how power happens and how people achieve power and so forth. It's not wrong. But like everything Machiavelli, like I said, I was very, when we read through The Prince recently, I was very, felt attacked by because I understand that what he's saying about how powerful people behave is correct, but also as someone who is not, obviously I'm going to take offense to that, or that, I don't want to live like that. Hey, I don't want to be a slave. I think is something that you But yeah, you give it to the young men like this is how things, and they always imagine themselves as the master. And but if you're not already actually in that position, you're probably not going to be. If you're not in line to get in that position right now, you're not going to be the master. So what do you really want to advocate for? And that's the tricky part. Is understanding that.
The desire not to be a slave is a very tricky thing to navigate when you break down what freedom actually means. What sense of freedom do you want? And this is one of the beauties of going back through Plato, because there's nothing Plato doesn't address. There's nothing he hasn't thought of. And the essential debate that starts the whole discussion of the Republic is, of course, is it better to be the just man or is it better to be the unjust man? With Thrasymachus, the sophist, taking the position of, no, it's better to be unjust. Obviously, even children know this. It takes a mature, brainwashed adult with a developed super ego from society to think it's better to be just. And then what Socrates ultimately, very meanderingly arrives at is he says, you are not one being. You are roughly three entities, right? And you can be enslaved to your passions. You can be enslaved to your appetites. And that is essentially what the tyrant and the tyrannic, the aspiring tyrant, the free spirit who just lets himself be as nature intended or whatever. That's what he is inviting, is your body tyrannizing over yourself as a whole. And I mean, obviously that can be taken too far, and various religious sects with priestly castes make a tyrant of the mind over the body in the other direction. And that's pretty grotesque in its own way as well. And so you can, seesaw back and forth on this endless pendulum of asceticism to complete hedonism and back and forth, or you can acquire experiences and over time aspire to a position of moderation, which is something we see a little bit more explicitly in Aristotle, to his credit. Aristotle's wonderful on this point. But I think once you've done the work, you see that a little bit with Plato too. He's just, with Aristotle, what you have are Aristotle's students' notes. So everything is like lecture notes. It's very dry, it's very boring, it's very direct. Whereas with Plato, you have a polished product that is much more fun and enjoyable to read, and there's a lot more layers to draw you in, and it's just entertaining and it's fun. But I think on the attraction of virtue over giving in to the senses or completely tyrannizing over your senses, both of those are roughly in agreement. And I think what we see with these Gen Z vitalists is it's healthy in the sense that it's rejecting something that is insanely unhealthy from the mainstream, but they are going a little bit far, following coasting a little bit in the sensory direction. And I mean, what you see with the powerlifters that they're criticizing is essentially too much structure, too much discipline. And they're like, you're becoming something unnatural. Nature is follow your instincts. And that's what they are celebrating.
Yeah, and it's a silly argument, and we don't have to go too far into that debate. It was just something that I came up on. I'm like, who are all these Nietzschean vitalists, and it's literally in their name? I'm like, because I feel like I'm a Nietzschean vitalist. Like, what we should be, I mean, and then the thing is, you and I had a discussion about vitalism, the word, which is popularized by Almaru, Bradley Herbert, whatever. But obviously, it's been around. It's not the first person to come up with that word. It has actually kind of a philosophical history before that. But he's kind of repopularized that word. So you get credit for that when you repopularize things. I've done that with some things myself. But as a concept, as a general concept, I think solar idealism fits into vitalism. It's just a more specific thing. Of course, I love life. And of course, I want to be full of life and vigor and so forth. That is very much what we are about. But just then, if you get into their brand of it, like I said, it becomes almost kind of a weird kind of purism, because I think a lot of that kind of got mixed with like soul bra-ism, which is kind of a this move toward nature also becomes a soul bra thing, and then you start taking like organic wine mom advice about health, and it becomes just a silly thing, and whereas like I always it was a joke in the discussion that they were having. It was a little bit of a back and forth, obviously, between roided out bodybuilders is what it really was, and that's a very specific thing that's very specific men are trying to do. And also, it was a young versus old thing because they were like, I would want to be a roided out 40-year-old, blah, blah, blah. Look, isn't it better to be, young and healthy and like this basically like twink who put on like 5 pounds of muscle? And, like, isn't it better to be like this? And yes, there is a classical model of beauty that comes from, say, Greek statues, which is basically wrestlers. Yeah, like they're basically high school and college wrestlers. And yes, that is as the male standard of beauty, that is pretty much what Western society has arrived at. But also, that's very temporary. Like,
what are you going to do after that?
Yeah, what are you going to do after that? You can't really make your life philosophy about being your age that you are right now.
Yeah,
That's
very good. Then what? It is good. It is good. You don't have to reject that, but yeah.
When someone is that age, you can't really blame them because they're battling, like they're being pulled by nature, their bodies like exploding, all the, stuff that happens. And well, I mean, I was that age a long time ago. I was the age that the Zoomers are. And yeah, I mean, I can't blame them. It's like the solar idealism is more mature than what we're talking about.
And I don't want to talk.
It's the teenage angst version of vitalism.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk down to them because I don't feel that old. I just turned 35, which still feels fairly young, although I'm sure to some guys are like, you're an old man now. But like, looking back on the late teens, early 20s, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna be wrong. And the main thing you're gonna be wrong about is you're gonna be so certain that you understand the world and everyone else is retarded and wrong. And it's like, oh man, I've been there. But there are better directions to be wrong in, and there are worse directions to be wrong in. And is this like criticizing older bodybuilders thing like wise and like a sophisticated good position to be? No, it's kind of silly. But like, is that better than being a like double mask trust the science Reddit kid? Yes. You've erred in a good direction. Now tweak it, refine it, keep going with this, and like let yourself. I remember there's a gentleman who I was like, briefly interact with every now and then on social media who was he was playing around with like the ideas of polyamory, and he's like, I don't want to be locked into modern standards of like civilized notions of how men are supposed to behave. It's all like cucked, it's all this, it's all that. And he's playing around with an idea and he's asserting it with a great deal of certainty, but he was really just testing it out. A year and a half later, he was married. A year after that, he had moved with his wife, they're very happily married now, to like Georgia or somewhere in Central Europe. And they're still doing adventurous, cool things. It was just exploring an idea there. And I think one of the tragedies of the internet, I think, is like one of Costin's big ideas in Bronze Age mindset, and I think this is correct, is young men need uncontrolled space to explore and to develop their own ideas and all that. And the problem is that because the internet is forever, it is broadly controlled space. And you can't play around with ideas and try out ideas without consequences in the way that you could back in the 80s or even in the 90s when I was growing up. I could come home from school in 7th grade and be like, you know what? I think Satanism is right. Screw God, blah, blah, blah. Or like, I think democracy is wrong and fascism is correct. I think Hitler did nothing wrong. I could say and come up with some pretty extraordinary, edgy, exploratory ideas that are maybe there might be a grain of directional utility or even truth in some of those, Perhaps they're mostly wrong, but I can go down that route and explore it, and you almost can't do that anymore without it haunting you for the rest of your life.
Well, I mean, that's how they do it, though, is that they go on Twitter and become anons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I mean, they're doing it as anons, that's the. But then, you know, like like I said, there's a double-edged sword of that, and we've talked about that a good bit this week. You know, like, okay, well, you go and be anonymous and get in your online clicks of you know, whatever, but and whatever you're into is going to change 4 times. I mean, I know this one guy I'm going to think of, and I like him, so I'm not going to say anything.
I already know the person you're talking about.
Maybe. But there's one person you know, like they've done like every diet. Every diet is the best diet, and then there's it's brand new, and then it'll be another thing, and then there are I've certainly tried on a lot of things. You try on a lot of hats, and you see which one fits, and then you find out. And this is one of the things my friend Trevor said to me once, because he for years I think was a member of the Ayn Rand's Objectivist Society or whatever, and he was involved in that for a long time, and then he eventually left that, and he said it was very important for me to realize why I was not an objectivist. You know, like, and that's what you do. You know, like that's how we got to solar idealism, is because I tried on something else. I was like, kind of, but no.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like, and that's, I think you're actually at the best age for saying things authoritatively that aren't completely retarded. but that, you know, like you know enough about the world. You're like, it's like when you're 25, no. But you know, you've done some things, you know, and then I'm at the age where I'm like I said, maybe I don't know. Gets weird.
I'll make my new ideology. I'll make a new competitive religion with solar idealism. That's all about being.
Are you going to be my Judas?
I'll just be, my new religion is just about being 35 forever. Then. No, Ian in the chat says clipped. I assume that's the part where I was describing someone saying Hitler did nothing wrong.
I was actually going to make a joke like, we've been pulled from Instagram.
Yeah. Such is the price. Yeah, Mike says I'm a boomer, but nothing like the one in the last essay. Yes, I mean, like we're speaking in generalities. I'm a millennial. There are many, many negative things to say about millennials. Hopefully, only a few of them apply to me.
Yeah.
Ian,
they're the most cooked by boomers.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I mean, you know, like they're the ones who are going to hold on to that shit with their cold dead hands.
Yeah.
You know,
the Gen Z might be a bit schizo, but at least they're a fun and interesting kind of schizo. not like the sad we're gonna make an impact with organized social change of my generation.
God, it's just that sounds like erectile dysfunction. Just like you almost have to say it with a voice that causes erectile dysfunction. We're gonna make an impact. It's social change.
Yeah, I never get tired of explaining to Gen Z kids the Coney 2012 campaign. Do you remember that? It was like the first viral political social activist campaign. It was a total fraud operation, but we didn't know it at the time. It was when I was in 9th grade. And there was all these people that were putting these like Coney 2012. It was using like presidential propaganda style to make him famous, but he was this African warlord. They wanted to make him famous to raise money to combat this. And it just all got siphoned off by the organizers. It was the total, but like all of these high school kids got like so deep into this viral social media campaigns. Like that's the millennial. That's what it's like to be a millennial right there.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, this is one of those discussions where I remember the word of that, you know, floating around, but you know, as I said in a discussion with the guys at the gym, they were all talking about their 9/11 experiences in elementary school, and I was like, I was already a man.
I was in 5th grade. Yeah,
I was already a man. I had an apartment in San Francisco. The same kind of like you're like I was in 9th grade. I'm like, I don't know what I was doing. I think I was writing books probably.
yeah. But it's fun to remind. It's especially fun to remind millennials of Coney 2012 because many millennials who were deep into it at the time forgot, and it's like they repressed it, like a Freudian memory they don't want to come back because of how embarrassing it is. And I think it's because it is embarrassing, but it's an amusing kind of embarrassing. It's not something you should be like. It's not a moral failing to be taken in by a social activist campaign like that in the early days of the internet. It's funny, frankly, but it should be enlightening. And this is the other pleasure of going back and reading like Plato or Aeschylus or Homer or Gilgamesh or the Rig Veda or any of these other old texts is you see there are these vast cultural differences, and yet there are some profound psychological and even social similarities. They're facing exactly the same kinds of problems, even if they're emerging in slightly different technological landscapes that we are facing today. And these people who like turn 18 and they think they've learned how the world works, and it's like everyone around me is retarded, but I've seen through it. It's so humbling and sanity inducing and amusing at the same time to look back and see, oh, we've been fighting the same battles for thousands of years. I'll still engage with it. I'll still like get involved and fight in this fight because it's fun and it's what we're supposed to do and it's how the world works anyways. But I can chill a little bit, our generation is not cooked. We don't have it the worst of all times in history, nor are we, contrary to, the Enlightenment Steven Pinker types, in the best possible timeline. We're in a very comparable situation to many generations of the past with some new and novel challenges. We have to figure out how to navigate the internet and AI and other stuff like that. But we don't have to deal with Huns, so that's nice. You're
not indentured servant going to the coal mine. There's
that. Yeah. Our water isn't laced with lead, which is always a plus. We don't have the Black Death, killing a third of our family. There are worse times in history, and there's probably better times too. But on the whole, we're in more or less the same situation. The experiences that these 18-year-olds are having, and it's so you almost can't tell them this because it's in that, like, the first time you have your heart broken, you're like, no one has ever felt the profundity of the emotions that I'm feeling right now, and it's so you can't tell someone who's feeling that way. We all have, and I'm going through a version of that with my, 5 and 7-year-old who are having extremely profound emotions surrounding like not getting to choose the dessert that they thought they were promised because they misheard something. And it's like, my parents don't love me. I'm going to leave this house. And it's like the emotions don't change. They just get a little bit more complex. When you turn 18 and then when you turn, 32 or whatever. So it's just funny to see.
They don't understand that, but that is kind of your responsibility to tell them that. I mean, not the kids, but like the 18-year-olds is like, that's what you have to tell young kids to keep them to jump off the cliff. Because, they have no sense of perspective. Like they haven't seen the same shit happen over and over again. That's what you get with age. It's like, oh, well, this is back again. But, like you said, the first time that they're still doing the firsts of everything, which people always said that's one of the joys of parenthood, is that you get to see people enjoy the firsts of things all the time. But they're having the first of everything. So, it's like they think the world is falling apart. Like, I always say, like, like you're in high school and you think the world's falling apart around you or whatever, something really bad happens to you. And like, I think it is good for them to hear from an adult that like I also felt that way, and now I don't remember any of those people's names.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to be like, oh, this I thought my world was falling apart 700 times, and I don't remember any of those people's names. And as an elderly gentleman, I now also try to remind myself of that as well. When I feel like I'm going off the deep end about things that are happening, like, remember how that happened and there was a big deal and you thought everything would go down, but then nothing happened and it was fine. Like that's like you have to have that. You have that life perspective once you've been down that road a few times. Like this is not that big of a deal. Chill out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Kyle says in the chat that Alamari wants nationalized breeding program for a bunch of vital, young, beautiful males to breed many young, nubile women. The most important issue for him is the breeding of a new aristocracy. So like the funny thing about eugenics, right, and is that when you think about it, obviously good genes are good. But there's two questions. Like, first of all, who decides and in what context is a gene good or bad? Because most genetic adaptations are contextual, right? If you're in a place with a lot of malaria containing mosquitoes, having sickle cell genes is actually a really, really good thing. In most other places, it's not so great. But like as soon as you get government programs involved,
right.
The incentives of power in the government, and this is another funny, like Platonic point. And it's very strange to hear people like Kostin, who is extremely well versed in Plato and so forth. But like the Republic is where we get the myth of the Ring of Power from, like the Lord of the Rings and the power, the centralization of power and its corrupting influence. It comes from the Republic. And as soon as you get eugenic programs in place, the what's it going to select for? The Curtis Yarvin has this example he goes to with the problem of the free market, and he talks about how did COVID happen? Like, how did COVID-19 come into being? And basically, the NIH started as some kind of like Save the Monkey Foundation. It was like rescuing endangered animals, but it turned out there wasn't a lot of money in that. And some brilliant fellow thought, I know how to make money from this organization. I'm going to research viruses. I'm going to buy this institution and I'm going to turn it into a viral research facility. And that's what he did. Now, the way to research viruses is to basically create them. And so the market created this because that's what was incentivized by money. And basically, market selection was not selecting for what was sane. It was not selecting for what is healthiest for society. It was only selecting for profit and for money. And it just so happened that creating deadly viruses that killed 20 million people was where the profit was. So if you create a eugenic program, the government involvement is its own selective pressure that excludes certain virtues that might be genetically virtuous and maybe selects for certain traits that might be useful to the government, but not so intrinsically admirable or desirable for individuals. So if you want to support eugenics, you got to just choose a good spouse, do your part. But,
I saw someone was responding to that on X or something like that about eugenics. And they said that Society Wives had that figured out years ago. Like society matrons had eugenics figured out years ago, and that's how you do it. Like, this family has these. This is the rich family, and they have the rich, strong conqueror. Da 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 da. We have to. All the people who are arranging marriages is what eugenics was. Until it gets into inbreeding, which is kind of the other way that goes.
But that's inbreeding is already among the aristocrats. That's already power corrupting the ordinary selective pressures.
Right.
And they thought that was eugenics because they were selecting in such a way that would retain their financial and political power.
Right.
So like as soon as you get government programs involved, like find me a government program of any size that isn't corrupt.
Right. Exactly.
And you want to put that incentive mechanism in charge of your genetics? Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Not a good idea. Yeah. It's that's the government's obviously going to mess it up. And also,
well, at the very least, it's going to mess it up by standardizing.
The people who are the most, if they really did it, you'd almost have to, like the Russians would have done that right. Because they would have done it just by data. Like back in the day, if you think about like what they did with developing like steroids and what they did with developing like all the athletes, or buy into the whatever Ivan Drogan like fucking Rocky idea of the Russians back in the day, like they would have been like gone on the data and like, okay, well we need to bring in this person, these people, because what you would really do, and this is what a lot of the people who are fans of this on the right don't want to hear, is what you do is you have to create mutts. And that's how you because what purebred animals are is that they're deformed. Is basically like the purest bred. Yes, you can have the purest bred horses that are fast, but eventually you have to bring in outside stock because they become sickly.
Yeah.
That's
the biggest, I think we can say, eugenicist, the most well-known eugenicist of our age, who I would say is Elon Musk, made this point. He's taken personal involvement in this mission, but like he, as you pointed out in your excellent, really, really good post today on Substack, but he was confronted on this question of immigration, and he brought up basically human biodiversity arguments. Like, isn't it best to not put all your eggs genetically in one basket, to have a variety, because you don't know what the future is going to hold. You don't know. How do you know what the virtue is? How do you know what is desirable? Is your opinion of what is desirable, or the official in the government who is saying this feature is desirable, this feature is not, are they operating from some like what's their foundation? Are they saying all men should be over 6'4"? Well, there's like an aesthetic appeal to that, but what are the health ramifications to that?
Well, they don't live as long.
Huh? Right.
They don't live as long. Tall people don't live as long.
Right. And there's just so many of these interwoven costs and benefits with all of these different features. How about eye color? Oh, like blue eyes are super, super attractive. But maybe they operate better in this environment and worse in this environment. Maybe blue-eyed people are susceptible to a particular disease that is coming in 2050, and we're all going to be wiped out, right? If we genetically programmed the whole world to be blue-eyed, out of pure aesthetics, what a hilariously narcissistic way to make ourselves go extinct, kind of an absurd hypothetical, but you can easily see how that reasoning would get you there.
Exactly. I mean, and something like, I'm sure even AI at the stage that it is now could actually probably figure that out, and would test for a whole bunch of things and like just spread it out, and it would create like, here's what you need to bring in from here, here's what you need to bring, because it would do it impartially and not like based on like, but my people. It would do it basically, okay, what do you need to make the best humans? Yeah. And that's how they would create super soldiers and all kinds of things. You could actually, computers would do that.
AI is an interesting one, because the question underneath a lot of this is, what sort of grand philosopher king would you grant the power over the genetics of your entire nation or the world? And a lot of people's temptation is like, well, AI is objective enough to do it. It's like, well, AI is very brilliantly engineered to have the appearance of objectivity. But it was programmed by someone or a team of someone's with their own biases, which are very easy to discover on the back end. There is no objective frame for all this. And when you think in terms of accountability and responsibility, the idea of giving one person that kind of authority and that kind of responsibility over the entirety of the world, or even the genetics of a state, is absurd on its face. And it betrays a kind of deferral, a sort of last man abdication of the burden of ruling, of decision making among the us lay folk. I think we have to make that decision. We have to choose who we're going to marry, how many kids we're going to have, what sort of job we're going to do, how we're going to live, and so forth.
Didn't we, when we were reading Plato at some point, did we be like, this is the autistic way to approach it? Is that, that's a lot of these things are like, this is how an autist would design a city. This is how they would do it if you were like, you just let a nerd fucking do it.
A little bit. I think we brought up the social media sketch of the autistic guy who's interviewing the prison inmates. He's like, oh, you have a regular schedule? You stay in your little cell? You're forming lines? What do I have to do to get in?
Right.
But of course, like the punchline at the end of the Republic is, of course, the myth of air, the underworld, where the one gentleman who had lived a virtuous life because he had been raised in a virtuous city, say like Sparta or somewhere, but he had lived that way because he had been constrained by the city. And so Plato says he only lived virtuously by habit and not by philosophy. So the minute he's taken out of that context and put into a new context and outside of his domain of experience, he chooses to become a tyrant and lives a terrible life. I think he's destined to wind up eating his own son. And this is like Plato repudiates the just city at the end. That's like the punchline. It's like, no, the autistic path is a fun thought experiment, but it's not an actual way to live your life. And in the absence of experience, you'll be living good, and then you get like one. I think I was actually speaking with someone recently about a modern contemporary example of this. Have you followed the news stories of in the war in Ukraine of the North Korean soldiers?
No.
Who are showing up to fight alongside Russia? So there was a very amusing series of stories about, and this could be total wartime propaganda. You can't take any news stories from Ukraine at face value, but there's a directional truth to this, I think. Anyways, these North Korean soldiers who have been raised from childhood to be warriors, or however the 300 Spartan line goes, but they've been raised not on the World Wide Web. They don't have the internet. And so they get to the front lines of Russia, and these young male soldiers are presented with the internet for the first time. Where do you think that goes? They all got completely one shot by porn. And it was apparently a real problem on the Russian front line for a while. And we heard stories about this with the Spartans. They would get like a year abroad after they're like to explore the rest of the world, and they were notorious for just going wild. Apparently some groups of Mormons do something similar, same reputation.
Ramaspraya with the Amish. Yeah.
Right. So like there is a danger in being too constrained by like rules of that kind. And that's, I think, what the Gen Z vitalist kids get right. There is value in exploration and just letting your instincts discover these things for your own and not be constrained by just jockos telling you you're going to discipline the whole time through. It's like, okay, that is a valuable tool, but there needs to be some experience built up and some exploration as well. And of course, you don't want to just fall into a freaking fentanyl addiction either.
Right. And that's what we always come back to is the the importance, we have this choice, this time in history. Are we interested in being human?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that is making individual judgments, and and weighing things with your own mind rather than letting something else make your decisions. Maybe the 20th century was about letting government make the decisions, and now other people were thinking we should let AI make all our decisions for us. And making your own decisions is what being alive. Why are you alive?
Right.
If you are, and that's where it comes down to. We had a brief discussion today. We won't go too far down that rabbit hole about free will, or I was looking it up because I was presented with a book, and I thought maybe it would be better than reading Sam Harris's book on free will. Because I was on Amazon, and I saw another book on free will, and it's something I want to tackle for this book that I'm writing, or I just have something to say about it. And it seems like in the 21st century, all the people who wrote books about free will are all leftists.
Are you familiar with Dan Dennett at all?
No. You've brought his name up before. But...
He one of Sam Harris's most frustrating and obnoxious debates, which is a high award, was one he did on free will with Dan Dennett, who they're very much on the same team on atheism, but Dan Dennett vehemently disagreed with Sam Harris on free will, and they couldn't agree on what free will was exactly. And I think that's Dan Dennett was not as skillful of a debater as Sam Harris, but his position is correct, that people have misunderstood what free will is. And what it comes down to is it is responsibility that is not actually contingent at all on a hypothetical ability to do otherwise. And that kind of compatibilism, which is what that's called, is very hard for young people to wrap their minds around. How could you be responsible without having the ability to do otherwise? Well, that seems unfair, because they've been raised to think that fairness is only being held to account if you could have prevented it. But there are downstream effects of being held accountable. You might be held to account for something you didn't cause. You might take precautionary measures, and it gets complicated and metaphysically as well as pragmatically. But Dan Dennett's defense of free will is his laying out of compatibilism is a really good framework.
It seems like I said, it's almost a childlike view of the world, in the sense of okay, well, obviously, I think anyone who doesn't believe that God puts little thoughts in our head probably believes that they come from our brains, and that it is a chemical thing that's happening, or electrical thing, or whatever, and we don't know where thoughts come from, really. There's that whole discussion, but I think we're all pretty much in alignment that we're animals, and we think thoughts that come from our physical bodies. So of course our thoughts come from our bodies, and that seems to be the argument they're all making. Well, your thoughts come from your body, so you couldn't have controlled it.
Yeah.
And then the thing is that not some of the things they were advocating in the previews of this book that I was looking at were, because of that, then you should dismantle the criminal justice system. And what a childish thing to say. That's all the things that would happen because of that.
That's back to your Substack. That's back to your Substack. Well, we don't know what the negative consequences would be, so let's just do it. Let's just do it. Brilliant.
Just do it. Let's say, we don't have proof that it wouldn't be bad, even though it seems like a really bad idea. We don't have proof, so let's just redesign society on a whim.
Ian in the chat says, AI tells me saving one trans person is more important than saving 1 billion people. Yes, that's correct. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, it seems
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Seven trans people to keep the race alive.
Yeah, well, and they're all sterile. Ridiculous. So it just seems like a very childish mindset, and this comes back to something else that with this larger debate about, you said like the commenter said that they want to create government programs of eugenics, right? Okay. Much with the free will discussion, I'm a very practical guy at this point. And okay, the free will discussion. Well, what is the utility of that discussion? Where does it? What at the end of the day, nothing changes, right? And you still have to have the same, before enlightenment, sweep the floor. After enlightenment, sweep the floor. You're still going to have to do all the same things. So it's kind of a jerk off discussion. And the same thing is true to a certain extent. And this is kind of me rereading through Aristotle as well. Is that beliefs are toilet paper. Your beliefs are adorable. Okay, you believe that we should create a eugenic program. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, tell me make the flow chart of how we get to there from where we are right now. Like how do we get there? Because that doesn't sound like a feasible idea. Not that it's that feasible in theory, but that it's okay, from where we are in America right now. How do we get there? What political platform is that going to go on? Who's going to vote for it? And was it how do we get to there? And I'm much more interested in what's going to happen in the next 5 years than this pie in the sky shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing as your beliefs are the same as if you identify as a person who has a belief. That doesn't mean anything. With Aristotle talking about character being your habits, and what your actions are what really matter, not your beliefs. Your beliefs can be anything. You can just I believe a thing. It really has no more value than putting those little flags on your profile, like the leftists all put their little flags. Here are all the things that I believe in. This is how I identify as a person. None of those, and you've done nothing to affect any of those things,
right.
In most cases. So it's virtue signal. It's okay, your beliefs. And the same thing happens on the right. It's like you have these people. It looks like some kind of social problem when I look at these people and then their X profiles or their Instagram profiles, and they have a list of 10 political things that they are. And that is very much a young man's thing, but not always. Here's a list of the specific kind of political beliefs that I have, and it's like this long, all these things that are me. And I bet they change once a week, but they're all these things that are me, and none of that really matters. I mean, it's cool that you're thinking. Well, you're thinking thoughts and you're thinking through ideas, and that's good. But okay, well, what practical application is that?
Well, the practical application is that of sharing your Spotify Wrapped, right? It tells other people who you are. It tells other people what you like listening to, and it lets
how can you find friends? It's why I say I'm a purple belt on jiu-jitsu. It's just so that jiu-jitsu people will like me.
It's one of my favorite takedowns of the World Economic Forum was I think this was a Scott Adams take, but it might have been someone else too that he was quoting, but someone went there to the World Economic Forum and he's like, all of you guys think that these are wealthy people trying to control the world. This is just a Mensa group on steroids. It's a bunch of rich people trying to find dates. They're showing up to network and to maybe hook up and find people. That's what Mensa is, as far as I understand it. It's just that's the eugenics program that all these right-wing people are talking about. Mensa. Go hang out with the Mensa people, see if they're top notch for that.
Yeah,
you be the judge.
Smart people trying to find other people, smart people to breed with.
Yeah, aesthetically might be not the desired group, but
so what you're saying is that it's the ugly smart people. It's the not hot smart people.
I have to go in a couple minutes here, but it reminds me there was a funny story circling around about an English lord, an English aristocrat who is putting out ads in a local paper for a wife, and his list of demands, or not demands, but his list. I want to see if I can find it real quick. It was like it needed to be 20 years younger than him. It needed to be a good breeder. He's 79, so I don't know what he's going to do with a 59-year-old. But he had rules like no Irish, because he's English, naturally. And it was no women from countries with green in their flag was one of his rules. Oh, I found it. Sir Benjamin Slade, 79, is searching for a wife. Must be a good breeder, at least 20 years younger. No Scottish women. Must be able to have sons. No communists or lesbians. I don't know why a lesbian would apply. No drug users or heavy drinkers. No Scorpios. Needs a shotgun and a driving license. Helicopter license a bonus. Able to manage 1,300-acre estate and 2 castles, ideally over 5'6", and no women from countries beginning with I or with green in their flag.
Which meant that he sat down and made a list of countries he didn't like.
He did. And I was sharing this to my friend. It's like, man, losing Italy seems like a valuable loss, but maybe it's a price worth paying for the rest, you know? Just funny.
Yeah.
Everyone's pursuing eugenics with genes or with ideas or with whatever in their own way, and that's the best way to do it, you know. It's just pursuit of the good. It's just pursuing good in genes or in art or in music or in political ideas, so you can find better friends. It's fine. Yeah.
It's just trust what you really believe. I guess the best way is to move away from the bad ideas of the last century, of all the people who were guilty about everything and hate fat, whatever, fat positive and all that kind of stuff, all the unhealthy things. And then if you just have healthy people that want to get together and don't feel guilty about it, then that's about as eugenic as you're probably going to get.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know that you have to bolt because you have another meeting to go to, and we should probably wrap this up. So we'll just wrap it up here, and then we'll talk next week. And now that I know that we can do Instagram, we'll promote it a little bit more. I couldn't tell if anyone actually saw it or not. I'm not seeing anything, but I just wanted to see if we could do it, just see if we could. So anyway, thanks guys, all you guys, for joining us, and we'll be back next week. And we always have good talks. So anyway, see you later. Stay solar.
Stay solar.
Stay solar.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Journal of Solar Culture. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. The first volume of our journal is available in paperback and now, finally, on Kindle. Pick it up in our store or on Amazon.